Thank you very much for waiting. We will start the session. Will Japan's STO take off with Act revision? It is a panel discussion. Introducing the panelists. From SBI Holdings, Executive Officer, Head of Blockchain Promotion, Representative of SBI Holdings and SBI R3 Japan, Mr. Mamoru Fujimoto. From Manex Group, CEO and President, Mr. Oki Matsumoto. Mitsubishi UFJ Trust and Banking Corporation, a Senior Chief Manager of Fintech Promotion Office, Mr. Toshihiro Tanaka. From Boostry, the CEO, Mr. Toshinori Sasaki. The moderator from Nikkei Shimbun newspaper, senior staff writer, a commentator of World Business Satellite, Yoichi Takita. I will hand over the microphone to Mr. Takita. Thank you for the introduction. This is about security token. We have 4 experts, exactly experts who are the pioneers in this area with the FIEA Financial Instrument Transaction Act revision as of May. Digitalized securities, the world of a security token has been initiated. Relevant technologies include blockchain, amongst others. Since time is limited, what exactly is security token would not be the focus, but how convenient and useful it is going to be is what we shall jump into. Offering, using security token, it's about offering, issuance. In the case of corporate bonds or securities, you might have some idea. But what is the expansion expected? How it might spread? May I invite Tanaka-san, Mitsubishi UFJ Trust. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Tanaka, Mitsubishi UFJ Trust and Banking. First of all, from the offering to distribution, I will briefly talk about STO and my perspective about how it might prosper, take off, or flourish going forward. First of all, why did we start? Please look at the left-hand side. That is on the procurement side, who needs the finance. Security token is so-called digital security, asset values, right to use. These were difficult to liquidate or trade or finance, but this financing will be made easy, convenient, or through this financing, new funds need to be developed. These are some of the use cases. The role of the trust bank, like ourselves, is in the middle, and eventually, ultimately, on the right-hand side, there are the investors, there are new investors, younger generation, those who wish to finance. On the right-hand side, these are the unexperienced, fresh investors who have none of this experience before, and we want to be the go in between. Why Trust Bank playing this role? As shown at the bottom, the ledger management. After all, trust banks are supposed to do something complicated, like looking after the shareholders register, for example, and it's a custody in the middle, the so-called management of the security tokens of the securities. We do have a subsidiary for management, but when there is a new token or security to be issued, this management is required. So 2 or 3 years ago, when this idea emerged, we decided that we are going to step into this area, that we are going to play this in between role, and at our trust bank, there are different asset values, and the focus is our core business, real estate, and the value of the real estate. In what way can we develop new investors? So under the current legislation or in terms of the workflow, we are trying to consider what can be done. Investors. So not only the traditional institutional investors, but expecting individual personal investors. Yes. Regarding this instrument, the broad and wide investors is what we are looking at. To take exposures in the real estate, there could be individual and more than 50 by public offering. That would ultimately be the target investors because there's the coronavirus and the REIT is very volatile. REIT is becoming more volatile, but by structuring the token and the function of the trust banks, then a new type of risk return basis might be created, and the individual investors through the web can actually sort of visibly invest in real estate. Thank you very much. So that was about the offering, the primary. And then because it is a security, there will be the secondary market that could be developed in the future. About the primary, about the issuance offering, thank you for the comments. So what might be the secondary market? Difficult to envision, and therefore may I invite Mr. Fujimoto of SBI Holdings about the secondary market, if you can. Thank you. Fujimoto, SBI Holdings. At SBI, about 4 years ago, we have started our activities about blockchain. In 2016, I became the head of blockchain. And in 2017, Payment and Settlement Act was revised, and crypto asset or digital currency back then, the law was revised. And the so-called ICO, how it could be realized in Japan, SBI has been working on that. I mean, I'm not still responding to your question. It's a kind of an introduction, but SBI Capital based in an ICO company. So this is equity finance alternative for startups. However, this did not really advance. And equity type of crowdfunding is what we are doing, which is called equity clouding. And in 2019, FIEA and the Payment Settlement Act both were revised and new security token was introduced. And what could be done in this business area? So in terms of legislation, it was not easy to comply. The kind of a token-based security based on traditional securities or the deemed securities and a kind of a collective equity scheme, and by transferring the electronic rights. But it was difficult to comply, and therefore, in order to progress, STO association was established. So you started the association, of course, with stakeholders who agreed with us. We got together and established the STO association. There is the JASTA in terms of the security area, and they were a cooperative. And they decided that it is going to be speedy to establish an external third-party organization. So security companies who are interested in STO, including Nomura and Manex, any companies that are interested, we want it to be speedy. So we set up the STO association. And in terms of the industry law, in the secondary market, there is no specific legislation, and therefore, what is issued by security token, how could it be traded in the secondary market? It is not yet established. But using the STO association, how to establish a platform in Japan to enable security token in the secondary market, we are still working. There is no obligation to concentrate the trading on the exchanges, so there could be multiple platforms, or the issuer platforms and the secondary platforms could be separate. But in terms of the concept or vision, it may not be easily be acceptable to all stakeholders. So some parties need to be convinced. Thank you very much. So not just, but when new activities are to be initiated, establishing a new association that enables more speed, that was interesting. Some of the key wording were mentioned, like platform. What kind of platform might be established? That would be critically important for the spread of security token, and therefore, when it comes to platform, Boostry is exactly in this business. Mr. Sasaki, may I ask you?
This is Sasaki from Boostry. Thank you very much. So our company is a platform provider, and let me share our thoughts on blockchain and ST. We would like to leverage the strength of blockchain in creating this platform. So, for example, we have a platform called iBet, and the core part is using open source software. So that is the premises for our iBet. And also we have a common infrastructure. So Boostry is not just providing this and everybody who uses this system have to pay for us. That is not the kind of system. We would like to leverage the strength of blockchain. So we have had reached a basic understanding with the SBI and Nomura. So this is not just a Nomura Group initiative, but we would like to collaborate widely. And we would like to contribute our technology, and we welcome other players. And so if we can create such a competition, healthy competition, I think the Tokyo Stock Exchange or other exchanges, rather than being operated by one entity, it is a kind of a common asset for all of us. And that is something that should be created for blockchain as well. So we have several examples here. One is the digital asset bond by NRI. This is the so-called security token in the form of a corporate bond. And the return is a cafe point that can be used at the cafe. And so rather than interest, you can get free coffee at the cafe. That is the point that can be achieved. So in the primary market, we talked about retail investors, but for example, corporate investors will not really welcome free coffee. Therefore, this is more geared toward the retail investors. Also, we have, for example, agricultural project membership, the so-called utility types of tokens. So this is not the traditional security sense, but it has a utility. So it is not the completely new product. In a sense, these have existed from before, but it is easy to utilize this platform for these various products using blockchain.
Normally, according to information on the web, token security payment and utility, and it's like discussed as the three kingdoms in the Chinese history, like that they are separate entities, but it could be hybrid. I think they could be mixed or hybrid, and using that platform, it would be easier to go beyond the border or the boundary. Another question, NRI, a token or bond, about that, a cafe point is to be issued, but normally cafe point is to enjoy coffee, for example. So what you have just discussed, it just raised more questions for myself. Can you give more information?
Certainly. So when the token is used, so here between security and utility, we have, for example, stocks with shareholder incentives. And for example, in the Edo era, rice was used as a currency. So in that sense, that has crosses over between payment and utility. So this kind of concept existed from before. But so these are also rights and obligations. And digital-wise, we can manage who is the owner. And this can be referred and viewed by everybody. This is enabled by the token system. I think that's what makes this interesting. And for the cafe point, why this? This is actually a new system. So NRI, rather than via the security companies, they did the primary offering on their own. And so if you purchase the NRI bond, then the owner will have a cafe point. And then at the cafe, you can, for example, use 100 yen as 1 point. And on the background, there is a blockchain token that is transferred from A to B. So this is the kind of system we have.
The smartphone is the only terminal required.
Yes. Basically, from the user side, it's just via the smartphone.
Thank you. And then Manex, Mr. Matsumoto, my question. Mr. Matsumoto, in the financial industry, you are known to be the most global in terms of business. New York, London, you have very deep connections. But today you will talk about security token in Japan. But after all, in the United States, what might be happening in terms of technology or about the regulation? Maybe you can provide us with the overseas perspective. Any difference between Japan and the United States? And maybe we could have a global perspective. So, Matsumoto-san?
Certainly. Put simply, the US is progressing more and more, and Japan is lagging behind more and more. That is the kind of a very simple comment that I have. And our group, Monex Group, has been working on a blockchain bond offering and investment into STO platform. So this is just for your reference. And going back to your question about the US, blockchain, virtual currency, or crypto assets, these are security tokens. They were not the first into this. Actually, at the very beginning, Japan was ahead in terms of crypto assets. But the US, as a society, as a framework, progresses and uses that innovation more and more. So, regulatory aspects, of course, the technology continues to evolve, but regulation also evolves along with the technical enhancements. And for the security token, whether this is security or not, At the beginning, they wanted to have an in-depth discussion on that, but lately, they're not really discussing whether STOs are securities, but rather what is the necessary disclosure, whatever this is, what is the right disclosure to allow this to be traded. It seems that they're emphasizing on disclosure now because as society is developing, technology is developing, old framework is not adapt to cope with these changes. So they accept everything, and if it is being traded and distributed among a lot of people, then sufficient disclosure and explanation needs to be provided. And Japan actually kind of lagged behind and is actually going backwards. The Security Association actually did not want to deal with STO. They ran away. But at the end, STO will be controlled under FIEA. And if FIEA defines STOs, then this should have been under the Securities Association. So STO could not really be handled by FIEA initially, but the Japanese government decided to manage this under FIEO. So everything kind of went back to the past. So the FIEA was revised, and what can be defined under FIEA will be considered STO. In the US, actually, the legal system is coming after the facts. So people are already offering this and people are buying this. So in order to make sure that people don't get hurt, they are preparing the law to fit the reality. But Japan is actually first preparing the law and then the trading comes later. So I think fundamentally the direction between the US and Japan are different.
Thank you for that information. Because earlier, Mr. Sasaki showed us the Venn diagram, the concept diagram, from which area is the deemed or which area is the security. Rather than that, it's a hybrid, like crossing over the borders or the boundaries. By promoting hybrid, it's going to be more easy to use, convenient, more advantage to the investors. That is what I thought. I might ask all of the panelists, so Matsuo-san, Matsumoto-san.
So there are many ideas. So regulation should not be the starting point. So something up to 100,000 yen, you can do anything, whether it's a security or not, whether there's disclosure or not. If it's below 100,000 yen, the product, whether it's a utility or whatever, rather than categorizing strictly, we should give more freedom and create that kind of a safe harbor so that the technology and the systems can develop. And if something is really growing and expanding, then the necessary regulations need to be implemented. But I think this is the way to push innovation. And the US and China are taking this stance, but Japan is not. And I think that is very problematic because we don't know what is security or not. It's very difficult to define that because it evolves with the ages. So that's my 2 cents. I'm quite angry. And Sasaki-san, please. Yes, I'm also angry. I have been engaged in the STO discussions in the association. So blockchain, ST, even people with some expertise don't have a common understanding. Some people think that this should be included, other people think not. So as Matsumoto-san said, there is no fixed definition yet. So when rules are created at this juncture, of course, this rule may match some people, but maybe not to really boost innovation. And another point is that crypto asset and ICO problems were arising. So perhaps some conservative views were taken. But at the same time, these blockchain and tokens, once some technical background is clear, I think perhaps the regulations will be loosened to some extent. Because things are becoming more clear, I think some kind of exemptions or what is allowed and what is not allowed, I think it will be easier to draw the line going forward.
Yes, please. The security token, when we started the review, everybody thought it was highly interesting. Same in the US. The contents industry, the amount might not be large, but in Japan, if it is to be applied, for example, the creditors might be difficult, but about your name and about the sequel, about Director Shinkai, they are ready to bet on his film, and film coupons might be given, or the baseball teams or bullet trains. For the bullet trains, it could be securitized so that multiple owners can own the right and the travel coupons, or that you can ride the first inaugural transportation, for example. So far, it might have been corporate bonds or equities, which was not exciting, but fresh investors might start investment, maybe. So this is the hypothesis that we have started to study from a few years ago. After the start, as Mr. Takita mentioned, this is under the jurisdiction of securities regulation. So once these are developed, the security brokerages, it is monetary security. So it does have monetary value. And therefore, under the regulation, the value must be monetizable in order to distribute. Otherwise, risk-taking is not possible. Or if that is not possible, and if it comes to direct procurement, then there must be a brokerage like the security company. So in each of the cases, there are some difficult hurdles. As Mr. Matsumoto mentioned, under what principle can a security token be traded? Yes, we think there could be some flexibility. Even my daughter, she trades on Mercari, for example. She is already engaged in e-commerce, so that atmosphere already is spreading in Japan. So, for example, an express train reservation ticket, I think now there is an acceptability in the Japanese community to trade. So rather than Rakuten, if it is SoftBank who acquired your favorite baseball player, then you change your favorite team. So regulation also should be as adaptable and flexible as that. About your Mercari, about your daughter trading on the web, that's very interesting. So because of the spread of the internet, it's just like the historical old market, as we see in the textbook, that anybody can participate on the market. And thank you very much for waiting. As Mr. Matsumoto mentioned, if it is up to 100,000 yen, it does not need any regulation. But if it is financial instrument, there are lots of regulations. Investor protection is, of course, important. But when new technology is used, the protection is also enabled by new technology. Long ago, whether bill is authentic, but if it is sealed with a stamp, it must be authentic. But that was in the ancient time, and there can be digital authentication. Financial intermediary does not need to check the authenticity. It can be done peer-to-peer, but only up to a limited monetary amount. So if that can be spread, funding is now possible directly from the market, but it must be a significant lot. And what we had looked forward for from ICO time, regulation is necessary, disclosure is necessary, but to spread the market and the participants, what can be done? Not only equities or corporate bonds, royalty, and Mr. Sasaki mentioned about rice, for example. Yes, we are also thinking about such possibilities. So spreading the participants, we look forward to that. We still have some hope. And about the disclosure, about the corporate disclosure, whether the current system is correct, it could be more creative. Timely disclosure is important, but basically it should be audited before disclosure. But then there's a significant time lag. Rather than that, if it is something new or fresh, it could be even a monthly disclosure. What about a monthly financial disclosure? And if they're traceable without tampering, then it might attract more investment. That could be a fresh idea, but not regulations determining everything, but to allow the creation of such a fresh new market. Something creative like that is what I hope for. Mr. Matsumoto, back in 2017, one of the aims of the revision of Payment Settlement Act was to protect the investors and the CDF or anti-money laundering to eliminate the bad perpetrators, and then you have the freedom. But there was a bad incident, and the regulations tightened, which was unfortunate. Back then in 2017, only the minimum rules could have been established, and all could be left to the market participants. The market participants think hard. I had thought that was the ideal, and I have not dropped all my hope. If the person from the FSA was not available, this is what we are discussing. Yes, that was unfortunate. Today, we had invited an expert from FSA, but unfortunately, the FSA participants was not able to join. It's not that our discussion is very active or radical. No, my discussion would have been more radical if there was the participant from the FSA. And with the remaining a few minutes, I do have rather primitive, naive questions. Maybe Fujimoto-san. Crowdfunding. That is what SBI is very strong at. At the same time, the security token, what are the features? Can you tell us in a clear-cut manner? At SBI, I mean the crowdfunding, the lending type, we call it the SBI social lending. Literally, it is a social lending. So lending to social activists, but they do not have access to the market. So to collect the funding directly, but this is almost an extension of the money lending business. And currently, the interest rate is close to zero. The interest rate is a bit higher, so the investors find it attractive. And quite a lot in solar, yes. Yes, but basically it's money lending. And on the other hand, equity type of crowdfunding, this is for the startup to access capital. VCs, they do have lots of money, but the initial round is very difficult for them to collect the capital. So we want to support such startups. But both of them still very small in scale. It's only a few hundreds of millions, but most of them are much smaller. But we hope that it could be much larger with the security token. The traditional offering, compared to such, that would be something smaller, but it could be a direct financing method. And there are some investors, even in Japan, who are interested to contribute capital. Compared to the US, and not too much incentive to invest, but still we think there is such capacity in Japan. Thank you. Yes, thank you for the vision about the volume. Earlier, Matsumoto-san mentioned about the United States as a reference. Even in the US, or because it is the US, the number of listed entities has peaked out already, and unicorns or delisting, choose not to list, or private equities, they enjoy more growth. But how to offer capital to the startups, and the security token could play a role? What about this in Japan? Difficult, applicable in Japan? Any hurdles or difficulties?
So in US, there's the Jobs Act. So unlisted companies' shares under certain rules can still be traded. So entrepreneurs and seed investors exist in one stage, and then once the company gets bigger, then there is the venture capital that invests in the seed stage. So by different stages, there are different capital providers, and startups can grow using that ecosystem and then become a unicorn, listed unicorn, or be acquired by GAFA. But Japan doesn't have these different stages. The only way is to be listed on Mother's market. So about Series A market cap listing, that's it. And entrepreneurs, startups can only enjoy limited success. And the motivation it does not become that large. And Japan, by relaxing the type 2, paragraph 2 type of securities could be one way. But perhaps we can utilize the STO to fill that gap. So even in Japan, rather than being listed 3 billion market cap at Mothers, being able to acquire funding in different stages and growing with the STO, we thought that perhaps that would be the future, but the revision of the FIEA, we went back to the situation we had before. But I think we can't give up yet. The loss is too great. So we would still like to look into ways to use the STO to fill that gap or utilize the paragraph 2 type securities. And so we would like to consider, as a part of the stakeholder in this, to consider that. When you say paragraph 2, you mean the deemed securities? Yes, correct. Thank you. And Sasaki-san, do you have any comments? Yes, technically this is possible. If there is a challenge, I think the industry can take care of it. Technologically, we can take care of it. So unlisted stocks being traded by retail investors, that is difficult under the current rules. But we should really delve into why this is against the rules, why it could not be allowed. And perhaps there is a way to tackle that. And for the unlisted shares, I think there are technical accomplishments that we will be able to overcome that difficulty. And the second question is whether there are investors.
Difficulties might include disclosure procedures.
Yes, for example, if there is an unknown venture company, you can just look it up on the internet and look into the services. That's easy for everybody. So the situation is quite different. The information is available to all. So what is needed, I think, should be discussed. Again, we need a forum to discuss what will be necessary in terms of disclosure, and we should be able to relax the regulations with set upper limits and so on. So rather than based on the conventional rules, we should really reconsider the concept behind that.
Thank you. We are enjoying the active discussion, but unfortunately, we are very close to the end of the time. So your final comments by way of conclusion. Yes, please. About the security token, as was mentioned, it should be easy to finance, and compared to the bond issuance, it should be speedy plus secure and safe, and easy and kind to investors. Going through that balance is the difficulty. So that's where we want to focus. We need your support. Thank you. Mitsubishi Progma, we are participating, contributing in Boost Tree and investing in other entities, trying different platforms. Speedy is important. So if cases increase, there will be more followers and participants.
Safe harbor or sandbox, I hope that this is created. If not 100,000, then 10,000 yen is fine. If there is a field where anything is possible, then I think that there will be an evolution in technology as well as disclosure. So I hope that the FSA will consider that. The current securities industry is fighting over pies, but we hope that STO will be able to expand the overall market. So industry players, I think together, of course we compete, but also we should participate and cooperate. And then I think that we can create a very interesting market for us.
Thank you for your concluding remarks. I believe there is a huge future potential. I think that is what we have heard from the discussion. A special thanks to the 4 panelists. So thank you very much, and thank you very much to the audience.
Thank you very much for a very fruitful discussion. Once again, please give a round of applause to the participants.